Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the studio this evening. So what I've got for you tonight is a comparison between two sets of paints. On my left, I've got my Holbein watercolor paint set. Here they are. I've used these plenty over the years. I've got my swatch card here and all of my paints laid out. This is the standard set of 24 for Holbein. And in this palette, I've got my new set of Misson Gold watercolors. Here they are, brand new, put into their place. And here's my color card for those. And given that these are both Asian watercolor sets, the Misson Gold from Korea, the Holbein from Japan, I thought it would be interesting to see what the similarities and differences between the two sets of paints are. So I've gone through all of the colors here, and I'm going to go through them one by one. We're going to do a little bit of swatching with these, and I've found that there are 13 of the 24 between the two that are similar. They're not exactly the same. They're similar, and that means there are 11 that are different. So let's take a look and see what the similar ones look like. In order to do that, I've got a large sheet of paper here, and I've written all of the similar ones on here. Now, if you're counting at home and you're very quick, you'll notice that I've got, I don't know, only 12 on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on here because the 13th one that is similar is white, and white is just not going to be able to swatch well on a sheet of paper, so I left that off. But I've got the Misson colors and the Holbein colors labeled here, a little dark pen here, so as we do our swatch over top of those, we'll be able to see a little bit of the transparency or opaqueness of each of those, and I just want to kind of dig right in with this. I'm going to set my paints off to one side here. Let's see. Here's my Misson colors, and here's my Holbein colors. I hope that, actually this set needs to go this way so I can see exactly, based upon my card, what I've got going on there. So I can see what we've got going on. I've got a lot of clean water over there, and I've got a whole stack of towels here so we can make sure we've got some nice clean water here. And the first color that I want to swatch out is this Misson Gold lemon yellow. So I'm just going to get a nice bit of that on my brush. I'm using the Martini size 10 pure gray squirrel brush, and I'm just gonna swatch this right on down. This is about, I don't know, 3 inches long or so. So I want a nice full amount of this paint at the top and just let it bleed all the way down, and you can see how bright that one is. So this Misson paint is PY3. The corresponding paint in the Holbein paint set is permanent lemon yellow. It's way down here. Move that up just a little bit and this up just a little bit so you can see. This is permanent lemon yellow. So the interesting thing here should be that the Misson colors are just pigment yellow 3, and the Holbein colors, while it is pigment yellow 3 also, it's also got pigment yellow 74 in there, and that should change the color just ever so slightly. And it looks to me as though it kind of takes that bright yellowness edge off of it. You can just barely see. This is a little darker, not darker is not the right word, maybe a little browner, maybe, and this is a little brighter. Okay, so PY3 for both, but the Holbein has the addition of PY74 in it. All right, the next one is Permanent Yellow Deep, which is this one. And there we go, for the Mission Colors, it's a single pigment, just like the lemon yellow. A beautiful orangey yellow here, like a gamboge. That's this one. Here we are. I just bring that right on down like that, and you can see it's a beautiful, nice, warm, glowing, orangey yellow there. Right, for the Holbein, it's Permanent Yellow Deep also. And they do theirs in the Holbein set with 2 different pigments, so it's a mix of pigments. The Holbein is PY4 and PY83, and right away you can see that it's maybe not quite as intense in orange, just a little bit of a duller color, but when you really blend it out, it stays, it's a brilliant, nice color. Also a very gamboge looking yellow color, but it looks to me a little bit yellower, a little bit, I was going to say warmer, that's maybe not the right term, but definitely yellower. This is a little more orangey. Okay, now they both have a yellow ochre. They both start with the yellow ochre base. Right, my Mission Colors. The yellow ochre is PY42. Here it goes, PY42. You see a nice earth tone here. Maybe a little bit bright. That's okay. When it dries, it's gonna tone down a little bit, but a nice yellow ochre there. And on the Holbein set, let me just wet that a little bit. I haven't actually used my Holbein set in a I don't know, 6 months maybe. So the colors are a little dry, but they re-wet pretty quickly. I'm not too worried about that. So here you go. Here's our yellow ochre for Holbein. It's PY42, and it's not as yellow as the yellow ochre in the Mission Colors. Let me pull this up a little bit, and you can see maybe a little bit of those colors. Let me finish swatching these, and I'll pull this down, and we'll take a closer look at all of these similar colors. Okay, and I apologize, we're getting a little nerdy here with some numbers and some colors, but it is kind of important, if we're doing watercolors, to have some familiarity with what the pigment numbers are on our paints, and whether or not they're a pure pigment, a single pigment, or whether they're a mix of pigments. All right, so this is my Mission Color, and this is Rose Madder. Here it is. A nice, bright, clear, a little bit on the pinkish side, red. A wonderful, wonderful color. Look at that. Let me make that nice and strong here so we can get that all the way down. There it goes. Beautiful, beautiful color. And Holbein, of course, since I have it here, they have their own version of Rose Madder. Now you're going to see here, both of these Rose Madders are single pigment paints. The Mission paint is pigment red, PR 176, and the Holbein paint is pigment red 83. So they're similar, but they're different. Same names, of course, but you can see slight differences in them. And there are the two. This is a little bit darker. You can see it looks to me a little bit darker, and this may be a little bit pinker. But the two different versions of that. All right, now moving on from the Rose Madder, which is a wonderful red color, we have a bright, clear purple for the Mission set and a mineral violet down here in the Holbein set. And if I get the right one here, 1, 2, 3 should be, this one is my bright, clear purple. And it's a bright purple. It's a strong color. I'll tell you that. There it is, bright, clear purple for sure. It's a purple, purple, purple. There you go. It's a mix of 3 pigments. You would think maybe it's 2, a red and a blue in there, but it's a red, a blue, and a red. So it's actually it's a red, a blue, and a violet pigment. Pigment violet 3, pigment blue 29, which is ultramarine, and pigment red 122. Okay, and our mineral violet here in our Holbein set, a wonderful purpley color, is also a mix of, uh-oh, I got the wrong one. Hold on one second. It's this one. It's also a mix of, yep, a mix of 3 pigments. So PB29, which is more commonly known as ultramarine. Most people use PB29 as ultramarine. And it has PR 122 in it. So the red component is the same. The blue component is the same for both of these. But the mineral violet here has a PBR 25, a pigment brown 25 in it. And you can see the difference between those two. The difference that one having the pigment violet 3, PV3 in it, and one having the pigment brown in it, relative to the other two that are exactly the same, really do give a difference, a different color there. All right, the next one I'm going to swatch out here is ultramarine. And in the Mission colors, it's PB29. Of course, we've got some of that. And then in addition to the PB29, they've added a little bit of pigment violet 15, PV15 in there. So we get just a little bit of a different ultramarine than we would with most manufacturers. And you can see it's kind of a bit of a dark ultramarine there. Not super bright, doesn't jump right off the page at you. And you're going to see the difference here with my Holbein paints, which is a single pigment, just PB29. You're going to see that this one really pops off the page. It's a much brighter, much purer pigment of ultramarine. There you go. This one is a drastic difference. That violet color that they put in there really does tone that blue down. So that one you can really see the difference between these two. Okay, so on to the next color. And this one for me is a tough one in the Mission set. This is cerulean. Okay, now I use a lot of cerulean, and I use it, typically have used it in my M gram set of paints. And the M gram set of paints looks completely different than the cerulean in here. This is, to me, this looks much more of a phthalo blue, but they're listing it as a cerulean blue here in the Mission set. But here it is, a bright, bright blue. There we go. And it's single pigment, pigment blue 15. In the Holbein set, over here, you're going to see this one's a big difference too. It's a single pigment paint. But look at the difference between the two. Right, this is much lighter. Pigment blue 35. There it is. Drastically different. Also, maybe a little bit more opaque than the blue in this is more opaque than the Misson set here, and it's a much more granular. I'm going to pick these up in a little bit when we get done with this card, and you'll be able to see, like this ultramarine blue here in the Holbein set, much more granular. The cerulean blue here, much more granular than their counterpart on the other side. So that's one to watch out for. The next one we have is cobalt blue here in the Misson Gold set. Here it is, and again, I'm used to using cobalt blue in my M gram set, and it looks nothing like this, other than the fact that they're both a blue color. But this is a totally different blue, a wonderful blue nonetheless, but a totally different color blue, and I can't quite wrap my head around why that one is so different. Here in the Holbein set, also it's different, and they're very similar. In fact, they both have the same pigment numbers. They're both dual pigment, two pigments in these, PB29 and PB15. They still look slightly different. They must have slightly different ratios in them, but the same pigments in each. All right, there we go. So when these dry out, these should be very close. Not exactly the same, but they should be very close to each other. Let me get just a little bit of some extra ultramarine off of there and clean my brush. Okay, the next one I want to take a look at, the similarity, is burnt sienna. Now, the Misson set made their burnt sienna with 3 different pigments: PBR 25, PR 112, and PY 150. 3 pigments to get the one they wanted. Burnt sienna right here. Let's get a nice bit of burnt sienna on here. There you go. Now it is nice and bright. It definitely will stand out. There it is. Look at that. It's a bright burnt sienna. There you go. I don't use a whole lot of burnt sienna. I like this color. I don't know. I think you would have to mix this with something that's so bright. But that's the color they wanted to make. Okay, that's fine. 3 pigments in there. And now here's the Holbein version, which is a single pigment. Here it is. And it's more earthy. It's a little bit more muted. It's not quite as bright, not quite as in your face as the Misson burnt sienna. Right? This is PBR 7, pigment brown, number 7. There it is. Right? So we can take a look at these, and I don't know, they're drying very nicely. We're going to get a true tale when they're totally dried, but slightly different. Interesting that Misson wanted to take and put 3 pigments into their burnt sienna. They did the same thing with their burnt umber too. It took them 3 pigments to get their version of burnt umber, which I'm going to put on right now, and it should be this one right next to it. It is. right here. And while I'm getting this, I want to say, when I put these in my pans, you can see many of the Holbein paints came out a bit thicker, and they're standing up more. They look like there's more texture on the paints because they're more toothpastey when they came out of the tube, and the Misson ones were a lot runnier. I know that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the paints or anything. It's just a curiosity. They were a lot thicker when they came out, and so these ones all settled in the pan and they're nice and flat. Whereas the Holbein paints, they stayed in little mounds. I think you can see they stayed in these little mounds. There's one, the greens and the blues, and they never settled out very much. Okay, so now I need to get my burnt umber for my Holbein paints. Here they are, and let's see the difference between these. So they both start with a base of PBR7, and of course for the Holbein paints, that's it. They're done with it at PBR7. For the Misson Gold paints, not only do they have PBR7, they have PBR 25, pigment brown 25 in there also, and they snuck in a bit of pigment yellow 150 in theirs. And I can see it as I'm looking at it. It looks more yellowy. The Misson paint looks more yellowy, yellower-ish than the Holbein paints. Okay? Now they've got black, and they, of course, each took a slightly different approach to the black. So Misson did their black, their ivory black, with PBK 7, pigment black, number 7. It's a nice black here. Wonderful, wonderful color. There it is, nice and dark. You can see it there. And Holbein uses pigment black number 9. So we can see what the differences are. Should be slight, but they should be there. There's our pigment black for the Holbein paints. And I couldn't tell you exactly what the difference of these are. That looks like the pigment, the PY7, looks like maybe it's a little bit warmer of a black than the pigment black for the Holbein paints. So I don't know that exactly for sure, but it looks like it might be a little bit of a warmer black. We'll wait till these dry and we'll really see what's what on there. And then the last one that they have similar is Viridian. Right? They both have Viridian. They both use PG7, so we would expect these to be very similar. If they're not, something's wrong. They may not be exactly the same, but they should be very similar. And I should watch what I'm doing because Viridian will stain if I drip it on anything else. There we go. There's our PG7 for our Misson colors. And here is the Viridian on my Holbein paints. Just got to loosen that up a little bit. Now I don't know if I let these Misson colors sit for 6 months, if they would harden up exactly like the Holbein paints do or did. I suspect they would harden a little bit, but they do seem to re-wet really nicely. Actually, the Holbein paints aren't really bad at re-wetting, but these have been sitting around for quite a while. So there's my Viridian, and you can see they are different. Somehow, the PG7 is a little different between the two. And so what I want to do now, before I go any further, is I want to take a little bit of, this is my normal studio set. These are all M. Graham paints here. And I want to put in, next to it, a little bit of what I use, and I can tell you the pigment numbers. So this is Hansa Yellow. It's a cold yellow. I got a little bit of green in there. I'll try to get that out. Maybe this wasn't the best idea. There we go. We got some yellow in there. And so this is pigment yellow 97. So a little different than the other ones. Here I've got a Hansa. Here I've got a Gamboge, which is similar, right, to those two. That Hansa yellow there is pigment yellow 151, which is different than these two, and pigment orange 62. So the M. Graham set here has quite a bit of mixed pigment paints. Let's see, yellow ochre is 43. A little different, slightly different than the Mission or the Holbein. And you can see it's not quite as bright, maybe. It's a little bit more muted. Now here's the one I want to do. Is, Cerulean here is right here. And it's much more, there we go, much more like the Cerulean in the Holbein set. This is M. Graham again. And I was going to do some of this on the other one, on the differences. But you can see there, much more like this Cerulean really throws me off. I got a cobalt blue too on my normal palette. And it's quite a bit different, but I could deal with this one more. Right? This one's easier for me to wrap my head around than the difference in that that Cerulean is just so different. And I think that's, I do have an ultramarine. It's PB29. It's going to be very similar to these two. Here it is, but the ultramarine blue in this M. Graham set is very bright. You can see it's a very vibrant ultramarine. There it is. I don't have a rose madder in my M. Graham set of paints that I put together. But let's look at it, right? Let me see if I can pull this down for a second and we can take a quick look at it before we move on to some differences. Come on down, camera. There we go. So you can see this lemon yellow, this is a really cold yellow here. The permanent yellow from the Holbein one really does have a little different temperature to it and a slightly different color to it. I think you can see it on camera really well. And our permanent yellow deep here, right? The addition of the second yellow does keep this yellower than this one. Our ochres, again, this one is a flatter color. This one is a brighter, more vibrant. They have more yellow in this. And I think you can just make that out. It's not a huge difference, but if you were painting a large wash and you used this yellow ochre, you'd say, man, that is bright. If you used this one or this M. Graham, which is even more muted than that, you would just put it on and you'd go, it's yellow ochre. But that gets to be a bright color. Our rose madder over here is an interesting take because they're the same. They're both single pigments, and they're both slightly different. This one a bit darker, a little bit more maroon right down here in the midtones, and this one a bit pinker down here. Our violets, the addition of this brown really brings this color down. It's a much darker, this is a much brighter, well, they call it bright clear violet, so it's much brighter. The ultramarine on this side, that violet color really brings this down. Look at how bright the M gram one is, how bright, especially in through here, the Holbein one is. These are both single pigment paints. That addition of the pigment violet in here really does bring that down. And if I bring this up, you can see how much this has granulated as it's dried out. Much more than the ultramarine blue for Mission colors. If we look at the cerulean, see our cerulean is this when it's full color here, right? This really thicker part, it's just such a dark, crazy color. And as it dries and lightens up down here, it's much, much lighter than that, but it's still such a bright color. This blue is much more muted than that, and again, so even more with the M gram. And this is another one where you can really see, or I hope you can really see, the granulation in this cerulean from Holbein that just isn't here in the Mission paints. Right, our cobalt blues are pretty similar. They've dried pretty similar. Right, not exactly the same. There might be a little bit off with the ratios. I think this is a little thicker of a mix, you know, similar to up here, but certainly down here they're the same, and up here they're very similar also. Right, our burnt sienna, again, this is another time when you look at this. If you look at it here and here, you can see this is much yellower. For whatever reason, the Mission paints, they like to add this yellow into everything. PY150, they add it here, PY150, they add it here, PY150, they add it up here in the yellow ochre, PY150 again. So they really like that PY150 color for some reason. Our burnt umber, yep, here it is again, right? This is a more, and this one is granulated out a lot more too. This one, not so much. Maybe I didn't do the best wash here. My paper bubbled here a little bit and stopped everything. But this PY150 that's here does give this a more of a yellow look to it. Our two blacks, now that they've dried, they're fairly close, especially in a mid-tone range here. In where they're thicker, maybe this PK7 isn't quite as transparent, it's more opaque, but a little bit different. And our viridians here, where they've dried down here, they're distinctly different. I don't know how you get to be quite that different, given that they have the same pigments that they're using, but they're a bit different here too. Maybe it has something to do with the binders that they're using on those. I'm not sure. But those are the difference, I'm sorry, these are the similarities. Now let's take a look at some of the differences, and we can see what exactly, or we can try to look to see what they were thinking of with these different colors while they were putting these sets together. Maybe, at least that is my hope that we can do that, whether we can or not. So I'm going to start out with Mission Gold Yellow Orange, which is this one up here. Got just a little bit of red in there I need to get rid of. So in my M gram set, I have a color like this. It's Azo Orange. My Azo Orange, I have a spot here written to put it on there. Oh yeah, that's why I did it this way. These are differences. I'm still thinking these were similarities. So this Azo Orange, we don't have a corresponding orange in the Holbein set. So I'm not sure why. Maybe they're going to paint more florals with this orange. Maybe they're trying to think what else you would paint with orange. Maybe they want to paint more oranges with their orange. I'm not sure. But the Misson set has this orange color that is not there in the Holbein set. The next one is quinacridone permanent rose, which is here. This is a beautiful color. It's a bit pinky. Again, I think this would be great for some floral paintings if you're so disposed to painting florals. This is PV 19, pigment violet 19. If it's a violet, it's a very light violet. It's not the heaviest, darkest of color. It's pretty transparent anyways. It's a quinacridone. So there it is. A wonderful color. I do use something similar in my Holbein set. It was quinacridone rose, and I'm just going to put it there. They both use pigment violet 19. And I'm just throwing these M-gram paints in here because I want to give a little bit of a comparison here. Okay, permanent red. Permanent red for Misson Gold right here. This is a red that you would think like a fire engine red. Right? It's bright, it's bold. There it is. It's PR 112, pigment red 112. A beautiful, bright red color. Let's tighten that up a little bit. There you go. You can see it. It's a wonderful color. Let me get that, I guess, a little bit more in the middle here. I use one in my M-gram set, which is Pyrrole Red, which is again a cherry fire engine red color. Now, what I don't know, I haven't done this comparison side by side between these two. The Pyrrole Red dries really dull and really lightens up. So I'm curious to see side by side what this permanent red from Misson Gold looks like. Then I've got over here, I've got this bright opera, which is a crazy bright pink color.